everyone. I am so thrilled to be here and welcome everyone on behalf of Executive Voices to our first virtual event, which is really exciting. And, you know, I can't tell you how much can change in 6 months or so, because last March for our last event, we were all gathered together for this, and we were meeting in person, and it was actually the last live event that I did before COVID lockdown took place. And on top of that, I was also pregnant, and so, you know, things have really changed. We're all working from home now, and I have a 4-month-old and a teenager in my house, so it's real exciting around here. But with that being said, I wanted to go over a few logistics before we get started today. So first off, everyone is on mute, and you will be muted throughout the presentation. Your video is off, so no worries there. You're only going to see those of us that are speaking this evening. And you're also going to see that we're recording tonight, and that's so that we can share this out to our networks, so you can go back and listen to some of your favorite parts. So just know we are recording. And that being said, let's test out one of our features. We're going to start out with a poll, and you're going to see that Anna may do this throughout the evening as well with everyone. So to begin, we are gonna see how many of you have attended an Executive Voices event in the past. So go ahead and answer on your screen. Wow, I see numbers coming in there. Great job, everyone. I'll give everyone just a few seconds to respond. Okay, so a couple more coming in here. All right, so let's look at the results. All right, so about 40% of you have joined us for an event in the past, one of our live events, and 60% of you are new to Executive Voices. So that's terrific. Welcome. And at this time, I'm gonna pass over to Miss Amy Bittner and let her get us kicked off. Amy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. Hi, everybody. It is so wonderful to see all the names, sadly not the faces, pop on board. It's wonderful to be back with you. My name is Amy Bittner, and I am a principal at Mercer in our health line of business. And I serve, along with Amanda, as an advisor for the Executive Voices Speaking series. And I actually became an advisor because I attended an event, the very first event hosted by our friends at Western Union. I know a few of you are on the call right now. It was supposed to be a one-time event, but it became clear from the audience engagement that there was a true appetite for this cross-leadership function type networking and idea sharing. And with that, Executive Voices was born as an ongoing speaking series. Now, we did see a lot of you have never attended an event before. So for you, and also just as a reminder to our guests that are on today that have attended an event, the mission is really to provide all of you and our members with a thought-provoking executive dialogue and expose you to a new way of thinking, whether it's a new way of thinking about a current problem, an issue that you're having, or maybe something you're really excited about, just a new approach by hearing some new leadership voices in your ear. And for those of you who have attended in the past, you know we have a lot of fun and we make some great personal and professional connections along the way. So please, 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 if you love what you hear today, reach out, link in with our panelists, link in with the guests, and we'll all get back together again really soon. Now, Executive Voices was the brainchild of my friend Anna Conrad, who almost 15 years ago launched her company, and she's the CEO of Impact Leadership Solutions. And her team provides leadership development, executive coaching, team effectiveness programs for organizations of all sizes around the country. And I know some of her clients are on the call today, which is wonderful. Now, in addition to all of that, she's also featured on countless radio shows. She's been featured in a business journal in pretty much every state. And she's also the author of 2 leadership books that she wrote. One is called Revolution, One Man's Leadership Journey, and the more recent book is called Rise, Finding Your Executive Voice. If you're interested in either one of those books, you can buy them on Amazon, and we'll make sure that each of you have a link to find that book after the call today, as well as find out ways that you can engage with Anna if you're interested in further conversations. And with that, I would like to introduce you all to the moderator of today's conversation. She's one of the best listeners on the planet, my friend Anna Conrad. So Anna, can you kick off our topic and introduce our power panel today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy. I'm so happy all of you are here. I cannot wait till hopefully next time where we can actually be together in person. As Amanda mentioned, at our last event, the topic was resiliency. At that time, we had no idea that the topic would be so timely. Today, our panelists will share how they have helped lead their organizations, not only through COVID, but also in other turbulent times. But we want to make certain that this program is relevant to you, those of you that are there watching. Amanda will put a poll on the screen about your experiences in the last 24 months. Please choose every option that is relevant to you.
Okay, I'm starting to see some results come through. Great job, everyone. Give a few more seconds here, especially since it's multiple choice.
It's a great idea, Amanda. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Amanda keeps us all running smooth, as you can see.
Okay. Couple more seconds for folks to vote. All right, let's see the results here.
Wow. It's pretty amazing. It looks like almost every single option has been chosen. And of course, a substantial change in office norms or expectation is the highest. But that change in executive leadership is really high, as well as business strategy. And thank you so much, Amanda. You can go ahead and close that down now. These are all topics that will be discussed today. Today's conversation will expand way beyond COVID. It'll provide you with experiences and wisdom that will help you lead your businesses and your teams. As you can see from our panelists, there is a lot of accomplishments. I'm not going to go into each person's bio in detail. That alone will fill all of our time. I will give you a little information though about their companies, and I encourage all of you to go to their LinkedIn profiles to see what their accomplishments are. Our first panelist is Dan Jablonsky. Dan is president and CEO of Maxar Technologies, which I have to say, hands down, is the coolest company that you have never heard of. Carrie Hicks, who I believe is on the call, give her a shout out, sent me this description of what Maxar does. Whether it's helping NASA monitor air pollution by the hour, helping end slavery with satellite imagery, or being part of the team putting the next human and first woman on the moon, at every opportunity, Maxar harnesses their capabilities for a better world. I cannot wait to see what Dan has to say. Our next panelist is Courtney Graham. Courtney is the Chief People Officer of Four Winds Interactive. Before we get into what Four Winds Interactive is, I want to give some props to Courtney. We just found out that Courtney has been selected as a finalist for the CHRO of the Year by CHRO Today magazine. Very good job. Let's learn now a little bit about what Four Winds Interactive does. Amanda, would you please play that video?
Connect people. I really think that our purpose as a whole is to bring the world together. What we do is we enable people to be able to communicate more effectively using a digital platform. Our industry is called digital signage. We like to call it visual communications because it's a little bit broader than just a digital sign. And what our software does and what our company does is help people build these different types of applications that are going to run on a screen and deploy the applications to a screen and then manage that big network of screens and devices that are out in the field.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. And so our next and final panelist is Michele Delman. Michele is Executive VP of Care for Inspirato. Get ready to be in envy of everything that Michele does, because her team oversees the 170 luxury vacation properties around the world that Inspirato has. Her team also creates experiences for Inspirato members, like going to Wimbledon and even going to the Kentucky Derby. Amanda, would you mind playing the video that we have of Inspirato?
Everyone wants to be on vacation, and that's more true today than ever before. At Inspirato, vacations are more than a break in the routine, more than an annual obligation, more than a holiday. They are the relaxed smile across the room, the laughter from the pool, the clinking of the glasses, the not checking email, and the photos of sunsets, splashes, and amazing views you never want to forget. But most of all, vacations are time. Time to focus on what matters the most. Time uninterrupted with your family and friends. Time not wasted on worrying if everything will be okay, but instead knowing it will be perfect from the moment you open the door. The world has changed so much, but your need for a vacation remains. Get away with your loved ones. Be confident, be safe, and be certain that Inspirato will take care of everything else. The world is waiting. Let's go.
Thanks, Amanda. I don't know about all of you, but I am so ready to go to that beach. But before we delve really deep into the questions we have for the panelists, I want each of them to take a few minutes to share a little bit of their own stories with us. Dan, would you mind starting us off?
Sure thing. I think. Come back on video.
Yeah. There you go.
Hey, everybody. Dan Jablonsky here. Everybody's getting used to the virtual training environment, I guess, presentation environment. Anna, thanks a lot for having me today. Great to see everybody again. I'm Dan Jablonsky. I'm the CEO of Maxar Technologies and have held that job not quite 2 years at this point. I started off a much different job in the company and have been through 2 different mergers, 3 or 4 different jobs at the company. I was the general counsel, and in January last year became the CEO. So I saw a bunch of lawyers on the list, a bunch of my old colleagues from the Colorado Bar Association, as well as the in-house groups, and wish I could see you all in person today, but looking forward to having a dialogue with you. Not sure if you want, pass it off.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, let's see, Michele, would you mind going and tell us a little about your story now?
Sure thing. And thank you, Anna, so much for having me. This is really fun. I'm just pleased to be with everyone today. And just a little bit of my background, and I'll just start from the beginning. I started as a marketer. I worked for years at Quest Communications before it became CenturyLink. I was a copywriter because that was my college education. And by the time I left, I'd done everything in marketing: radio, print, TV, sponsorships, all those things. I'd had so many great opportunities there. I'd really grown up there, but I was looking to make a change because that was a 60,000 person company at its largest, and I was ready for something a little bit different. I'd had some great leaders, I'd had some not so great leaders, and it really kind of enforced my understanding and need for just how important that leadership is. And I'd recently had twin daughters, so I went shopping for new opportunities and ended up finding Exclusive Resorts. It was a startup at the time, but I loved the product and the people and the creativity that I could have there. Now, 3 years in, Exclusive Resorts was sold to new owners and changed significantly. Marketing had been getting a little rote for me, and I knew I needed to leave and make a big right-hand turn. And so I decided to see that as an opportunity. I knew that as a marketer, I got to talk about the business all the time, but I really wanted to get my hands dirty in the business. And so during my shopping, I applied for a job that I had zero experience in. It was an operational role. It was running a high-touch customer service team at TW Telecom, which is now merged and changed 100 times over. But I was supporting the Fortune 50 customers' telecom networks. Super humbling experience. I had a ton to learn. I went from being the expert in marketing in the world that I knew to having to learn a whole new language filled with telecom acronyms and complex technology. And I had to earn the trust of a team who'd been doing this for years. But I ended up loving the job and knowing that customer operations was really my calling. And so even though I was loving it, I got a call from the folks at Inspirato, my current employer, where I've currently been for 7 years. And it was from the original founders from Exclusive Resorts. They were looking for a strong operator, a champion of customers. And so we're a luxury hospitality company, as you saw in the quick video there. We help our members travel in style. And I'm responsible for all things related to the member experience, from the time they join and book to the time they take those vacations. Our service teams in the field, it's challenging, but we're rewarding. We're always dealing with new challenges and issues and have never been more challenged than we've been since early March, when we were all learning about COVID for the first time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michele. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Gosh, you know, when I think you asked Anna to share our story, I came from a long line of educators, and my parents always said that when you do something you love, it never feels like work. And I remember when I was in undergrad, getting my undergraduate degree and trying to figure out what I was going to get my major in. And by the way, in my 20s, I was complete free spirit, but I love speech. Not speech as in speech pathology, but speech as in public speaking. I've always, since the time I was in my 20s, I have always been really captivated by the idea of storytelling as a way to just teach and share information. So long story short, I got a degree in speech. And when I graduated, I very quickly realized that nobody cares about that degree. So reflecting back on my parents' advice, the next thing I loved was shopping. And so I got a job in retail and pretty quickly became, you know, one of their top salespeople, but more importantly, developed this awesome relationship with the founder of that company. And one night I had stayed late to help her redo the whole store. And she said, you know, Courtney, I love your style. I love your work ethic. I'd like to take you on a trip to New York, and I'd like to teach you how to become a buyer for our company. That was the first door that opened for me. And ever since then, every single door that has opened was not necessarily because I was the best candidate or even the most qualified. It was because of the relationships that I had with people. And now that we are in this pandemic, relationships are even more difficult than ever because it's a virtual world. So, you know I thought about on that day in March, as we probably all did, how are we going to continue building relationships with our customers, with our clients, with our colleagues, with our teams, with our people? And not only were we in the middle of this pandemic, but at the same time, we were in the middle of this huge cultural crisis happening in our country. And as the head of people, I wanted to make sure that we had a safe place to share views, express frustrations, make sure that our company maintained our consistent values that we had worked so hard, especially as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the workplace. And so just thinking about how are we going to do this all remote? And during all of this, we went in the direction of let's talk more than less. And, you know, I'll talk more about this, I know, as we get into the panel discussion, but really leveraging our people and thinking creatively, you know, how are we going to continue this dialogue? We did everything from creating weekly LLAMA meetings, which stands for Leadership Listens, Ask Me Anything, to creating lunch hour learnings around hard topics such as racism and the having discussions, and really leveraging the creativity of our people.
That's great, Courtney.
Yeah. So this whole journey, has not been easy for anyone. It certainly hasn't been easy for me. And one of the core principles, I guess, leadership principles that happens to be a value of mine, as well as a company, is to bring your best self. And I think it's hard. It's been really hard to do that over the past 6 months. But what I've learned is that when it's hard, that's when bringing your best self matters the most. It's what keeps me going. It's what keeps our leadership team going, as well as our company.
That is great, Courtney. And I know we'll have more questions later. We're going to ask you to delve in even deeper into some of the things you have done to keep that culture alive. And as a matter of fact, I'd like you to even start off for us with the regular questions. But before I pose it to you, and it kind of goes right in with what you were saying, this is for everybody listening. If you have a question for the panelists, please type it into the Q&A feature. Amanda will be monitoring it, and we will leave time at the very end for Q&A. So Courtney, I'm actually going to pick up right where you left off, and let's talk about COVID. What are some of the assumptions that have been overturned in this past 7 months? Although it seems like a hell of a lot more than 7 months. But what assumptions have been overturned?
There's been so many. Three kind of come top of mind to me. One is you can actually make improvements in this environment. We saw our engagement scores. We also measure on a quarterly basis other things that have been really, really meaningful to us during this time, like communication, collaboration, trust. All of those scores have actually gone up. For the most part, especially the scores around communication, trust, transparency. So I think the first assumption is that you can actually make some pretty significant improvements in this really challenging environment. The second assumption would be that people need, we used to think that people needed to be in the office to be productive, to build community, to be effective. And gosh, were we proven wrong on that? I mean, we just hired 2 of our most critical executives who do not live in Colorado. We would have never done that before. We wouldn't have even entertained the idea. And then thirdly, I guess the third assumption would be that people are their most creative and innovative during these stressful times. And that when you kind of let those barriers down and embrace your people and pull them in, and I'm not only talking about inside the walls of your company, but also in your community, sharing best thinking. We used to be so intimidated in the tech industry of our competitors, right? And sharing information and sharing people. And now it's like, let's tear those walls down and pull people together. So that we can bring our best thinking. And we've had some of the most engaging, creative, all hands meetings where, quite frankly, I fall in love with our people every month watching those meetings. So yeah, lots of things that have caused us to think differently, for sure.
That is wonderful. And I do love how you said kind of embracing more of your competitors. And that's important for people to understand, not just your competitors external, but at the executive level, which most of our audience is. It's embracing who you're considering your competitors internally. Mm-hmm. So reach across those silos, especially during this time when we are so virtual. Now is a wonderful opportunity for you. Michele, what about you? What assumptions have been overturned?
Well, like so many other businesses, we had been watching COVID really, really closely in the first quarter, right? We're a global travel company. So we had been reacting on a case-by-case basis as we were watching these closures in Asia, right, first, and then Italy, and so on. And here we are canceling trips for members as we go, trying so hard to protect as much of that revenue as we possibly could, right? That's our habit. Let's protect what we've worked so hard to book. And we were really holding on to that, right? It was very chaotic. And once we would get one destination sorted out, another was in jeopardy, and it was whack-a-mole. We were going from one destination to another. And I distinctly remember the day, and right, we're all reflecting back, I think, in this conversation, back to that day in March. There was one particular day in March that I remember, and you might all remember it as well, but it was when Jared Polis closed Vail Resorts and all of the Vail Resorts destinations around the country. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was a pretty cold day, and all the other mountain towns fell like dominoes. They were just all closing. And it was just after we had made our difficult decision to close our offices and to work from home. So we were still kind of in shock, right? We were very much in shock, like most people likely were. It was also the very middle of spring break, one of our most important revenue months of the year. And in that moment, we all looked at each other and said, look, we have to make a tough decision here. We have to close every residence in our portfolio. We have to cancel every trip that we have on the books. Not only did we cancel every single trip and talk to every single member that was impacted by that, we also offered a 100% refund for all of those nightly rates. It was extremely uncomfortable. And when all was said and done, in that decision, we lost over $30 million in revenue, and we knew it was never recoverable, right? You never get that time back. You never get those months back. We were so in the habit of working so hard to control the ins and outs of our revenue, and we had lost all of that control. In that moment, though, without knowing it, we had set the tone for how we were going to be navigating all of the uncertainty by putting our members first, being as flexible as we possibly could, running a travel company in the middle of a global pandemic. What we gained that we also didn't necessarily realize in that moment was so much loyalty from our members who've really loved how that inflection point has impacted not only those destinations and those decisions, but everything that we've done since that time. So that's what we lost in that day, and that's what we gained in that day.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Well, then I have a follow-up question. If you can just give us an inside look, how has your business model changed?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's changed a lot. Right, once the shock of all of that had sunk in, we got to thinking about how do we keep our members engaged, right? We know we have to keep costs low. We know we have to keep our payroll going, and we know we have to make it through this time period where we're collecting no revenue, and there's no expiration date. We have no idea, right, when the end of that time frame is. So kind of three main things. The most significant thing that it pushed us to do is reframe our entire product set. For those of you who've looked at our products before, maybe some, maybe none, typically members join the club with either a fairly significant buy-in or a fairly significant time commitment to being in the club. And we said, well, look, it's a time of uncertainty, right? We have lost this ability to control our members' decisions, right? So we thought, well, let's reflect back on that inflection point, let go of that control even more, and restructure the club more like a traditional subscription, like a Netflix or a Rent the Runway, albeit more expensive. But if we do it that way, and we capture more interest by relaxing our practices and making it easier for members to do business with us. And we also, in that time, announced more flexible cancellation policies. Like I said, that flexibility in the product set is probably the most important thing that we learned, and the thing we did first. The second thing we did is we embraced the virtual event strategy, much like you've done here. And I think we're all adapting to it, right? Like Dan said, every month before the shutdown, we hosted dozens of complimentary events, like sporting events at our suite in the Pepsi Center, meet and greets around, in cities around the country, culinary events. And members that attend those events are three times more likely to renew their membership. So this was something we felt really strongly about continuing. And I was so proud of our events team. Within 2 weeks of the shutdown, they had built out a full schedule of virtual events. They got super creative really quickly. And we're hosting French patisserie baking lessons with French pastry chefs from their apartments in Paris, all on Zoom. Wine tastings from, Psalms in Napa, where we would ship wine directly to our members' homes. We did kids' arts and craft lessons to keep our members' kids entertained. And so that became a big part of what we did. Our members are loving them. And even though we could have some events now. Our members are saying, no, we want more virtual events. So we're continuing to do that. And then the third big shift is how we acquire vacation opportunities for members. I think, you know, typically our members are most interested, so we're most focused on these exotic destinations around the world, but you can't go there, right? So we quickly shifted our focus. Our members were desperately just seeking a change of scenery, right? We just want to get out of our houses and we want to go be with family and friends and we want to be safe, right? So we shifted our attention to drive to destinations and a real focus on how we keep our members and our teams safe so that we can open and we can stay open. We hired a PhD in industrial hygiene, and she reviewed all of our cleaning protocols and helped us build all new housekeeping standards, pre-arrival practices, post-departure practices, providing PPE to our employees and to our guests, and a ton of other protocols. And so far it's been very, very good. And everywhere we can be open, not only are we open, but we're very, very full.
That is wonderful. Thank you. And I love how you took the virtual world that we've all had to become accustomed to and really adopted it to the experiences. I know I
started it at first, right? And here we are, and it works.
Oh, you're making me feel really bad for that. My binge watching of Shameless. Guys, please don't think poorly of me, but I admit it, I'm watching Shameless. My binge watching is Shameless when I could have been learning how to make pastries from your Parisian chef, your Parisian baker. Now, Dan, I'm going to ask you, and hopefully this is okay. You took over the reins of Maxar at a very tumultuous time. And I hate to say it, but you probably added a little bit to it, to some of the changes that you made. So will you briefly walk us through what led up to the board appointing you and then the lessons that you learned?
Yeah, sure. So just kind of as a little bit of background as I tell a story here, but Maxar today is about 4,000 people across the world. We do about $2 billion in revenue. And we do everything, as Anna said, from Artemis missions. We're building the first elements of what will become the orbital stations around the moon. We're involved in the studies right now to put people on the moon. We fly our own satellites. And we do a lot of missions for the US government and other allied nations as well for people that depend on critical technology and critical infrastructure on a daily basis. We've got about 300,000 users inside the Department of Defense that rely on our satellites and our communications gear and other things to solve missions real time. You've probably seen us in your daily life with an application like Google Maps. So if you click satellite imagery on Google Maps or Apple Maps, that's Maxar's imagery. We're the ones that fly those satellites and process that and move it around the world. Maxar is a company that got created in 2017. Prior to that, there were 4 different companies. There was Digital Globe, which at the time of the merger, I became the president of. A company called Radiant, a company called SSL, and a company called MDA up in Canada. And in 2017, we did a big merger. We racked up the debt to about $3.5 billion, and we looked at this new space company of the future. And I was one of the senior executives after the merger to take part of that forward. Up to that point, I'd been the general counsel. So talk about career changes, right? In 2019, we hit a real low point. In January 2019, we lost a satellite. An $840 million asset quit working. We'd been the subject all throughout the fall of short seller attacks. Our business was suffering in a sort of a decades-long nadir in our satellite manufacturing business, and we hadn't won any work from NASA yet, and or any substantial work, I guess would be the way to put it. And we just completed our reincorporation in the U.S., and the chairman of the board had changed over. The stock was down from mid-70s to about $6. Our bonds were trading down, and the new chairman took over and asked me within a couple of days of taking over that the board had decided they'd like to have a change in the CEO, and they'd like me to do it. So it was a bit of a interesting circumstance to walk into as having never been out of central casting or never been a CEO before. I rapidly took I guess my first words out of my mouth were, "Sure, Hal." He's a retired 4-star general, and he asked me to do it. So the first thing you do is you say yes, and then you kind of try and figure out what that means. Over the course of a weekend, we negotiated all of the transitional aspects of the job, and Monday morning, I was in front of investors for an all-day call as the new CEO who nobody knew and had never been a CEO before, with a company that had suffered quite a few setbacks. As I said, the stock was down in the 6s, and at one point it got down to just over $3 in the spring. And the bonds were trading in the 70s. And the bonds, when they trade in the 70s, if you're financial types out there, that means that people are betting on how many cents on the dollar they're going to get in case you go bankrupt. We dug in, took a hard look at the strategy, at our cost structure, at the disparate sort of amalgamation of companies, flipped the strategy over in a couple of instances. We had voluntary turnover of our employees of over 25% in the Bay Area, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty crisis set of situations. And sort of dug in. I picked my management team, picked the people that were going to help set the strategy with me. We let go of about just shy of 20 presidents, senior vice presidents, executive vice presidents, and presidents in the company. Did a pretty abrupt change on our space business, and took out about $60 million of cost, which is hard, because these are teammates that when you say take out costs, that's not just stopping electricity bills or stuff like that. It means a lot of layoffs. Right. And kind of long story short, about 18 months in now, just over 18 months in, we are stocks clipped 30 the other day, but it's back to 26 after the recent comments by the president today. The bonds are trading above par. They're at about 108 to 113, which means people like them as an investment tool. Our turnover is down to 8% in the Bay Area. Some of that's COVID related, but we did some surveys about 9 months into my tenure and benchmarked ourselves against the tech industry. And the tech industry was 70 to 72 is the norm, and we were at a 66 at the time for engagement scores. We took our most recent engagement scores and we're 78. So we went from 6 points below the tech industry. Now we're 6 points above. We took out about $1 billion in debt along the way. So the company's healthy again. The stock's trading well. The programs are on track. I think we're looked at as, from the resumes I'm seeing fly in and the LinkedIn invites we're getting, as really an interesting place for people to make their careers. It's been a really interesting ride. Fantastic team that got a lot of stuff done. And when COVID hit us, we kind of felt like we were just hitting our stride, and nobody expected this to be on top of all of that. But we've adapted very well. We continue to grow the business about 7% annually, even during this time period, and keep our programs on track. So it's been quite a ride. I don't know that I'd recommend it for everybody, but it's been a great team building experience for us.
That's great. And what lessons did you learn, Dan? Just a couple. What are the most important lessons you learned during it all?
Well, I think so I was a lawyer for a period of time before this. I was a naval officer and a nuclear engineer. And we like to see things go right. And you like to think that you have, as I think Michele said and Courtney said as well, you like to think you have a certain amount of control over things, or over decisions, over the advice you give, or the things you make. And with that much stuff going on, you make a lot of mistakes. You've got to hope that you make a lot more right decisions than you make mistakes, but you've got to make them in some cases pretty quickly. That on the information at hand, it may or may not turn out, even when it's the right decision. Sometimes it turns out the market or something else gobsmacks you. But I think the biggest thing I learned was, regardless of whether you're making mistakes or not, you have to make decisions. It's really good not to make those decisions out on a limb by yourself, but to have the team involved in thinking them through, trying to get them as right as you can, and then admit to the mistakes you make along the way and see how fast you can correct from those. So that's been I guess two things I've learned.
Yeah, that's really good. That admitting mistakes is really important. I know that's a lot of things that some senior leaders have a hard time with. So thank you for sharing that. It takes humility. And as we know, during times of crisis, and I'm going to move us ahead now to COVID, during times of crisis, people need to be cared for and they need to have a sense of autonomy. Courtney and Michele, both of you have very unique cultures in your respective companies. So I'm going to ask you this, Courtney, first. What have you done to help maintain that sense of culture, especially as the person in charge of people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really vulnerable place to be, right? I mean, I remember when we, back in March, we all overnight really went to a completely remote environment. And, as an executive team, we were sitting around thinking, gosh, I don't know if this is going to work. I mean, we'll try it. It was like a fire drill. And it worked, right? Like people liked it. They're actually happier. We learned a lot of things through this. But it was still scary to think about, gosh, we had really put ourselves on the leaderboard as a top place to work. We had made humongous strides in our engagement scores. And it was a scary time to try to think about, okay, well, how do we do this now virtually? One of the things is we really leveraged the best thinking of our people. One example I'll share is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, has always been a big part of our people strategy. But we had to think about it differently, especially with a lot of the current events that were happening kind of right and still are happening right around that same time. And so we restructured that committee. We also created what we're calling squads underneath it. And this is all grassroots. Anybody in the company can be involved. We do limit it to a certain amount of people who are on the council, just so that we can make decisions and act quickly, which will lead to a second point that I want to share. But the squads are really interesting because we realized that we needed to create spaces for people to have safe conversations about things that matter to them. So for example, we have a squad for veterans. We have a squad for women, and we have about a dozen of those squads, and those squads meet as frequently as they want. There is some structure to it, but then they work in collaboration with our DE&I council to make change in our company. One of the biggest things that I think is a standout for any company is that when you look at data, whether that's engagement data, turnover data, but really listening to the employee voice and then having action. So another thing that we've really kind of upped our energy around is hearing that employee voice by surveys. So we have several surveys out. I mentioned a quarterly EMPS survey, which is an employee net promoter survey. We look at that data, we look at the commentary, we spend quite a bit of time analyzing it. We break it up by department and by leader, and then we really work with them on making change. And making pivotal movement in those scores. And I think that focus has really elevated, especially since we have gone remote. We also have put a lot of energy into other surveys. So we survey our people who are working remote to understand their levels of happiness, their levels of dissatisfaction, things that they're wanting more of, resources that they're needing. And we've learned some really interesting things. For example, some people want to come back into the office. Now, I will say most people don't, but some people do, especially people this surprised me, but of the younger generation. A lot of those individuals have roommates. They don't have a private office. They don't even have a desk and a chair. So being really open-minded to understanding, can we reopen the office? How do we do that in a safe manner? How do we provide resources to those individuals so that they can be productive in their home environment? So really paying attention. We also launched a survey to other companies in the community. It was primarily focused on tech companies, but to understand how are they thinking about their people. This goes again to really taking advantage of other people in your network, right? And people in the community. We're all in this together, really trying to solve the same kinds of problems. So why not just pull those people in? We got such great responses, super beneficial information, and people were very appreciative to it. Yes, I mean, I think there's not one thing, right? There's not one thing to maintain a culture. You really have to think creatively and think about it from a lot of different lenses and act on it.
Would you mind sharing the videos? I thought that was so fascinating when you shared with me about the employee videos. Would you feel comfortable sharing it with everybody else?
Yeah, which videos are you referring to?
I'm referring to the guitar, the
The-
person who's playing the guitar.
Oh, you're talking about the company meetings?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. So this was, I mentioned, I think in my intro story that, I fall in love with our people, right? Every time we have these monthly meetings. And so we always had these town hall meetings, these monthly town hall meetings, which are like, the typical, I say typical State of the Union because we are sharing business metrics and KPIs, right? But our meetings are probably the farthest from that feeling, right? They're super engaging, they're highly creative, and in person, they were a production. I mean, we had walk-on music, we had themes, we had swag, we had all kinds of fun stuff. So when we went to a remote environment, it was really challenging. It was scary thinking about, oh my gosh, how are we going to keep this momentum? And so we kind of crowdsourced it. We pulled our cultural influencers from across the company and we pulled them into the agenda. So, hey, how are we going to make this fun and engaging? What are your ideas? And the one you're referring to, Anna, was a 1980s MTV music theme. But it was so fun. I mean, the things that people came up with to include in that, and again, it was a production, but we had people playing the guitar and like impersonating different, 80s rock stars. We had people's faces superimposed over videos. It was hilarious and so fun. And then we've also done little videos like, what is it to work from home with kids? And so we would, whoever wanted to would submit like a 1-minute video of like just freaking chaos, right? Like, I mean, and one of the things that I think has really helped with our culture, to your original question with working remote, is being virtual, working from home has increased levels of empathy. It has humanized all of us, right? We're all on an equal playing field now. I mean, I had one of my kids come up with a Nerf gun to my head in the middle of a serious meeting, right? Like, you hear dogs barking. I mean, I would have panicked in the past if something like that would have happened. And now we just all embrace it. It's like, oh yeah, someone's dog's going ballistic, or, a kid screaming in the background. I mean, none of that really matters. And I think before, myself and probably a lot of us got fixated on that, right? Like showing up a certain way, being, nervous about certain things. And I think it's really helped our culture to just get to know who each other really is and to like put down those facades. And we're all here to do a great job. And honestly, that's all that matters.
That is so wonderful. I was doing an executive coaching call the other day, it was last week, and with a CEO who we're working on his executive presence, and he's wanted to increase his warmth and his empathy. Well, right in the middle of our call, and it's a very intense one, his son walks in brushing his teeth. And I'm like, that's what people need to see. They need to see that you're a dad whose son brushes his teeth. Michele, what about you? What has Inspirato done to keep that culture up in this working from home environment?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Courtney, listening to you talk, I'm writing down ideas and remembering what you're saying. I think because protecting our culture has probably been one of the most challenging parts of this whole experience, if I'm being completely honest. For any of you who've walked into our headquarters building in Denver, people always stop me and say, gosh, there's just something really unique going on here. Just an energy, a buzz, a chemistry in the headquarters. We have a really young workforce, and we've probably taken a bit for granted just how easy it is to keep everybody on the same page when we're all together. We do a lot of face-to-face business, and it's just always been part of our culture, and we've loved it. And so this has not been easy for us. We're constantly pushing ourselves to try to get better, try new things. We did our own version of employee NPS in the late June timeframe, and we got some really great feedback. We said, be honest, and we got some good feedback. So we're really pushing ourselves A lot of time spent in investing on training platforms because we change things all the time, right? I said initially, we changed all of our products. We changed everything on our teams. So focusing on those training platforms to make sure people can be successful. Our head of people operations is really, really focused on employee engagement, employee retention, and all of those things. But I just got really, honestly, Courtney, so inspired by some of the things you said. And it sounds like one of the your squads, sounds like this next example I'm going to share is maybe like a slightly more evolved version of that. So I was listening intently, but because it's Mental Health Month, just last week, our company hosted what we called a resource group. It was the first of many of its kind. And in our first event, our president just teed up an open discussion with all employees who wanted to go, completely optional, about managing family dynamics amid COVID. And our employees just showed up extremely vulnerable, sharing stories about things that they were struggling in, like homeschooling, right? We have no experience with that, but most of us are becoming teachers, caring for aging parents, trying to balance all of that with work. And while we can't solve those problems for our teams and our employees, what we can do is create an environment where people can be open with their struggles. They can hear support from coworkers, and most importantly, realize that they're not alone. And so we are realizing, right? We're not going back to the office anytime soon. We know this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we are going to be just pushing ourselves to be better and better all the time. It could not be more important that we retain all this incredible talent that we've taken all these years to build. And so we are going to be trying to reinvent all the time on ways to keep it a really highly engaged workforce.
That's really good, Michele. We'll return again to reinvention, but Dan, you guys were deemed essential workers pretty much from the beginning. Did I remember that correctly?
That's right. Yeah.
So what have you learned about your employees during this time?
Well, the work-home life balance is pretty much obliterated, but for most of our people. So of the 4,000 people we have, over the course of a weekend, 3,000 went to work from home and have been pretty much that way since this started. The other 1,000, though, have had to go someplace. They build satellites, they build robotic arms for missions. They work in classified facilities at either our locations or in Washington, D.C., and they have to go someplace. So our protocol has been, health, the right protective equipment for them, the right social distancing, the right protocols to make sure we're taking care of them. And if you're not one of those people, you're actually not allowed to go to those facilities because we don't want to increase the risk that they have to deal with in any way, shape, or form. And we've been very successful. Over the entire course of this, we've only had, saw the last report yesterday, 29 cases of COVID throughout the entire company that we've been able to positively identify. I'm sure there have been some that have passed under the radar, and not a single one of those caught it at our facilities. We did identify one at a customer site. So we're pretty proud of that track record. And everybody's either fully recovered or on the mend. So that's also good. The thing I think I've learned and that worries me the most as well is the mental toll it's taken on a lot of the people. Not everybody is as good at work from home as they were in the office. And some people that don't live in Colorado, that don't have the access to the great outdoors we have, that live on the 16th floor of an urban environment where all the restaurants are closed and the downtown's boarded up. It's been a lot more stressful. And I think the other thing we've learned is we're watching it really closely now, especially with the back to school environment, is the toll it's taking on some of our employees with the younger children. And, we're worried about that from the future of our labor force, some of the juggling they've had to do. And if you've got, I don't anymore, but if you've got 3 to 5 year olds and they can't get to the regular daycare, they can't go to the kindergarten, and you got a second grader that's, got a learning issue or something like that. And that's a lot harder. And unfortunately, disproportionately, a lot of that falls on the women in the workforce too. Yeah. So we're trying to stretch. We're trying to make sure we're it's not anybody's fault that this happened, that we're figuring out how to continue to take care of people so that, we don't lose that next generation of leaders, or they don't hit the right milestones they need to continue in their professional career development. So I'd be interested in hearing how others are dealing with that. Either anybody, on the panel or out in the crowd too, because it's a big problem. We're trying our best to work through it.
Absolutely. And I'll put some resources in. We'll do a follow-up email, and I'll put some resources in. And if anybody wants to add additional resources for me to send out about exactly what Dan or any of our panelists are talking about, please send me the information, or Amanda or Amy. And hopefully, Dan, we can give you some advice as well as some other people on the call. And, Dan, why I actually have you on the mic. You have had a wide and varied career. As you mentioned, you started off as a naval officer, as a nuclear engineer. And then I believe you worked in a private law firm. You worked, of course, internal in-house counsel. You've had some other things, and eventually became a CEO. Can you tell us just a couple of ways that you have reinvented yourself, especially during turbulent times?
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I've really reinvented myself at all. I think I'm kind of still the same person at different times. I'm a lot older. I don't have any hair anymore, but other than that, I think everything I've gotten paid to do at some point, whether it was, as a surface warfare officer, or as a lawyer advising clients, or as for a while I was a government lawyer doing white collar fraud cases, prosecutions. But you're solving problems for someone. You're figuring out how to advance, some type of strategy or solve problems. And usually when the problems get to our level, they're not the easy ones, right? Yeah. If they were, somebody else would have taken care of it a long time ago. So I think the thing I've learned most along the way is how you need to keep in, maybe it's not reinvent, but maybe it's continue to add to the toolbox to figure out how you can pick seemingly difficult and intractable problems up, and figure out, sort of what the parameters of them are, what the bites that are solvable are, what the strategy might be around that, and figure out if there are ways to move things forward with the people and the resources at hand. I used to teach at University of Denver Law School in the evening program there. And one of the things I would teach my students at the time was, what you're doing as a lawyer is you're engineering solutions for your clients to try and figure out how to solve a problem. Nobody picks up the phone and says, I'd like a larger legal department just because, or I'd really like to spend money with the lawyers today. What they're looking for is help solving a problem. It might be a regulatory issue, it might be litigation they're involved in, it might be a merger or an acquisition or a strategic contract they want to knock down, but they're trying to solve something. And you're getting paid to help them solve that. You're getting paid to make them, full on aware of what the risks are with it. But where your real value comes in is if you can sit down with people, and that's the same reason anybody hires anybody for anything, right? Is you bring them in to help you solve problems and to make things go better and faster and more productively for your customers and your clients.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you. And Michele, kind of in the same lines, you've had a varied career as well, and you shared part of that. Is there anything that you have done to kind of reinvent, or, to Dan's point, evolve yourself?
Well, I think, yes, similar to Dan, I relate to what Dan said. For me, it's like a shift in perspective or point of view, mostly around flexibility, right? I run a large organization with a lot of employees and a lot of complex moving parts. And I've always kind of had these, and I take a lot of pride in the strategies that we set and our ability to execute on those every time. And I've kind of had to take a, step back and say, well, that's not going to work anymore. What we were doing 6 months ago, those things aren't going to work. And so I'm being flexible. I'm trying to be flexible. I'm also using it, though, as an opportunity because, the human connection piece is so, so important. And so I've been trying to shift my point of view and say, look, this is an opportunity to get with my leaders, pull things apart, put them back together again in a new and different way. That way we achieve this, new strategy, whatever we need to come up with to solve this new problem. but I end up with these relationships that are stronger than they've ever been before, and these opportunities to bring people in, because what worked before, like I said, just isn't going to work anymore. And while you know, I think as operators and leaders, we like to say we're going to guide our teams through this, right? Well, those things just, you know, we have to look at them a different way. And it's really been a silver lining for me to spend time brainstorming with my best people.
I love that brainstorming. And we're going to move to keep going on the reinvention piece of it. I just want a quick reminder, put your Q&A, put your questions in the Q&A feature, everybody, and we will answer them, as many as we can, during that portion of our program. So Courtney, what are we learning about the future of work?
I mean, I think it's a constantly, it's very circular, right? It's an evolving environment. So every day I'm learning something new. One thing for sure is that our work environment and our work landscape is going to change, right? No longer are people going to want to come into an office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, right? And we've seen that it's possible to be very successful and productive in this new environment. And so I think really focusing on, I think every business should be thinking about, and some businesses it's going to be easier than others, but it's putting a lot of energy into how we're thinking about reinventing the workplace. Hoteling is big, right? Having a hybrid environment where we're allowing for flexibility of, you know, working from home, working from a coffee shop, working in an office space. I think spending a lot of energy figuring that out is going to be huge. Continuing to hire for skills that are going to be in demand and paying attention to that. I spend a lot of time reading about that and socializing that topic, and hiring people who are great at problem solving and critical thinking, people with a growth mindset, who are innovative, who are highly creative. I think that's going to be something that we really need to focus on when we think about building and developing our workforce. And then probably the third thing that's really kind of come to the forefront is just scenario planning, thinking about different things that could happen and how we're going to be proactive about that, knowing that we can't anticipate everything that's coming down the pike, but really leveraging technology and data analytics and predictive data to make sure that we're planning for things that are of the unknown, especially when it comes to our workforce and our talent to support our business growth objectives.
Absolutely. And Michele, I'm sure you'd love to hear her talking about being able to work anywhere, because I've already gone on the Inspirato website and figured out where I'm going to be doing some work next. So great link there. And there are just so many ways that we can move forward. There's so many different questions that we can answer. I am going to go back to Dan for a minute though. And Dan, we were talking a lot about the workforce. We're talking a lot about what we need from people, but I'm going to ask you from a senior executive, what do you see is needed from your executives? What is needed for them for the future?
I'm a pretty demanding boss, so we got a long list of stuff. I think the biggest one though is setting clear guidance and expectations for each other and for the teams. So we've been working really hard on trying to, instead of having a big long list of things we do, really focus and prioritize so that we've got 4,000 people in the company working on the right things. We've got 4,000 very bright people. They could be working on a lot of things and energy in a lot of different directions. It's called entropy. And we're not really in favor of that. So we're trying to figure out if it's one thing, if it's, no more than 3 or 4, what are those most important things, and how do you create the headspace and the time and the wherewithal for your teams to work on those? And that's been a challenge. The tyranny of the minutia and all the other stuff that, you got to take this training, you got to get that HR thing done, you got to this, that, and the other, and it all kind of piles up, and pretty soon you're not working on the things that are most important for solving a customer's problems, winning business, driving business, or taking care of something important. So I guess if it's one thing, it's really being honest and open with each other about what those most important objectives are, how we're going to grade ourselves on them, and how we're going to support each other and our teams through them.
Good. I love that. Yeah. So really understanding what the priorities should be doing, especially as Courtney mentioned, with such a changes that we're seeing now, and who knows where it's going to go. Um, you know what I would like to do now, if you don't mind, I would like to actually have each one of you give us a piece of advice. What is the one piece of advice that you would like for people that are listening to know? Keeping in mind, we've got a lot of levels out in our participants, but most of them are of the executive level. Michele, would you mind starting us off?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, it's tough to give advice. I think we've all been struggling through this, right? But I think the thing I've been paying the most attention to, right, is like I said earlier, we had our initial business problem. We all ran to the grenade, jumped on it, and did what we could to keep the company strong. And the thing that's been, just most important for me is taking care of the people that take care of our members. It's not an easy job. Yeah. It's not an easy job caring for complex travel arrangements all over the world with different requirements. And so I see it that my job is to really be caring for those people who are caring for our members. And so I've tried to, like probably all of us, experimenting with different things. Like how do I build my new habits, right? What are my new habits for every single day? Get up in the morning, go for a run, be ready for my first conference call. It's one after another after another. And trying to have those important moments, that with my people. So the one thing that I've done that I'm really enjoying and I'm planning on continuing is carving out some time every Friday afternoon to just call someone randomly and say, hi, how are you doing? Right? See if I can engage them in a conversation. See if I can get them to tell me if there's anything I can do to help them. See if I can learn something about the business or something that's going on that I didn't already know. It's a very time-consuming thing to do, and I wish I could do it every single day. I can't. It's not practical, but it's my favorite new habit, and I'm planning on continuing it. And so I thought I'd share it and just pass it along. It might be useful for someone.
That's great advice. Is there any reason why you chose Friday afternoon as opposed to any other time of the week?
Yeah, because I know on Saturday morning, I probably don't have a hardcore deadline, but every other day in the week, I probably do. It's just more realistic that it's actually going to happen that day.
That's great.
And then I can ask people what they're planning on doing this weekend, and maybe there's something to talk about from that standpoint, right?
Love it. Love it. We always teach that one of the most important characteristics of a leader is the warmth and the connection. So that is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Courtney, what about you? What piece of advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely along the same lines as Michele. It was interesting. I was talking with my 18-year-old who goes to the Lead School of Business, and he's very much into leadership. And he came home the other night and was like, Mom, the most important thing that you should do as a leader is make time to connect with people. And, I think so many times we can get so caught up with running from meeting to meeting and hitting deadlines and just all the things that all of us, all of those things that consume all of our days. But I think one thing I don't know if it's advice, but it's just one thing that I try to remind myself of is that, people are the foundation of everything we do, right? So we just acquired a company in the UK and being really mindful as, yes, we need to integrate these companies and hit all of these deadlines and being, get productive as possible. Really the most important thing to keep top of mind in the beginning is to create those spaces for people to connect as people. Because when you like each other, even if you don't like each other, but you understand each other and you have those connections, your communication's better, your productivity's better, and you're just more in sync and aligned to be effective together. So I think continuing to focus on the humanity piece of it, also, creating those spaces to build community.
That is wonderful. And so let me get this right. You guys acquired somebody and acquired another company in an almost 100% virtual world.
Yep.
Is that correct?
We've never even been to the office.
Isn't that amazing? All right. Well, you know what? I have to ask, what's the biggest lesson that you learned from that? Because I have a feeling you're not going to be the only person out there that is going to go through something like that.
I mean, it works, right? Like, I mean, be open-minded and think differently. I mean, one thing I'll share just as far as creating spaces to connect, I highly recommend the Donut app if you use Slack. But if you leverage technology, there are so many ways to connect. The Donut app pairs people up randomly and hooks you up for conversations, and think creatively, right? Like, it sounds daunting. I mean, we've hired people, executives who, this is a huge, I mean, for anyone, it's a huge commitment, but never met them, right? Like, except for on Zoom. So I think just having an open mind and thinking creatively about how you can make it work rather than being focused on all the things that are daunting.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, and congratulations on that. That's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Dan, how about you? What's one piece of advice you have for all of us?
Well, Michele stole mine, so I'll pass on one that I found very helpful, particularly as I've had a couple of these different jobs now, which the former, or I guess current CEO of Red Hat gave to me. He used to be on our board, and they just sold to IBM for $36 billion. But he said, I think the among the teammates that you have, among the people you either work with or aspire to lead, they've got a really a very finely tuned sense of the BS meter on you. So, be as genuine as you can. And none of us are out of central casting. Nobody was groomed for the job they've got or necessarily the one they want, but you are who you are walking into it. So whatever your preconceived notion of who the perfect person was that was supposed to be there, it's not them, it's you. You might as well just show up and be yourself and try and do it as best you can. So.
Love that. Absolutely love it. Thank you. And well, and the great thing now is we have time for Q&A. And those of you that are hanging on the line, please put any questions that you have. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them, put them in there. And we also have some questions that were sent in before. So Amanda, would you mind going ahead and taking care of the Q&A portion?
Sure, Anna. We've had some great questions come in as the conversation has been going. And this one came in from Peter. It was directed to Courtney, but Dan, you sort of were talking about this as well just a bit ago. So Peter says, what has become very apparent to him is that the impact of COVID on employees is quite diverse. Some, like parents with young kids at home, are being asked to do the impossible and may need to limit their work hours. Others, working more than they ever have, may have the impression that they are picking up the slack for others. This has created some tension and the potential to undermine the fact that we are all in this together, that mentality that's so critical. So have you seen this in your organization, and what have you done about it?
Yeah, we have. I mean, people are people, so you have all the normal things happening during COVID that you have during other times. Is the work being shared appropriately? Who's picking up this? Who's picking up that? What I'd say is this is pretty unprecedented. It's never happened in my lifetime before. So what we're working really hard on is trying to be transparent about how we're making decisions and what people are capable of and what they're not. And we're a team. And sometimes when you're a team, people pick up slack. That's how it is. I've done that before, and people have picked it up for me before when I've been through traumatic, life-changing experiences as well. And if you go into it and you're a team like that, and you're willing to be transparent about who's doing what, and just get it out there, it's a lot easier to deal with, and it's a lot easier for people to figure out, and it's a lot easier for people to say, look, this is the limit of what I can do right now. So I'll work my tail off right up to about then, but then I need space and I need time. And somebody else say, look, I've got more capacity now because I don't have any place to go. All my favorite haunts are shut down anyway, and I'll do more now. And I know it's a team, and I know you'll take care of me, and we'll take care of each other, and you'll catch it up later. So, but you can't get that done if you don't have that open conversation. But that's just my perspective, just the way we're trying to deal with it. I know we're not doing it perfectly, but love to hear what others think.
Thanks, Dan. Courtney, do you have anything to add there since the question was directed at you initially?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what Dan mentioned about being more transparent, I mentioned earlier that, we've leaned on more communication than less. And we've also done that in the form of helping our leaders, right? So even increasing the amount of like leadership roundtables we have, and I would recommend making them optional because, it can be like, as Dan mentioned, wanting people to prioritize where they're putting their energy, but creating those spaces for people to connect, to share best practices, and to give those leaders resources to managing their departments. I also think thinking about workforce planning differently, right? So if you've got, parents that have kids and don't have daycare, and, being flexible with their hours, right? Offering them to go part-time. And thinking differently about the workday. It doesn't need to be from 8 to 5 all the time, especially for a lot of different positions. So just thinking, again, differently about how we can make it work. Another thing that has come up is just, we all know this, a spike in mental illness, a spike in stress levels. Yep. Really promoting things like employee assistance programs, providing resources, and creating, opportunities for employees to voice those concerns and opinions.
That's good.
That's great. Thanks, Courtney. So this question sort of relates in a way. It comes in from our friend Stacy. Stacy asks, during the pandemic, are you handling performance issues any differently, specifically terminations due to poor performance, which could probably be a touchy thing. Courtney, maybe you want to start with that?
Yeah, we actually haven't seen, we've actually seen a dip in performance issues in a positive way. I think we've focused, I'll kind of back up a little bit. I mentioned upping that level of communication. We've put a lot of energy into working with leaders on talking with their teams about what excellence looks like in a role, right? What's expected, shifting your mindset to focusing on managing to outcomes and metrics rather than, can I see this person, 8 to 5, are they responding immediately when I Slack them? So really putting a lot of energy on shifting the focus of leadership and management to things that really matter to the business, and then coaching accordingly. We've also been, helping managers talk about how do you have meaningful conversations that are difficult in a timely way. And what we found is that your A players are your A players, right? And low performers are probably never going to become high performers. So we've also put a lot of emphasis leading up to this in managing people out who are not high performers, and growing and developing your people who are. So I think having that process in place is critical. It's very critical during a remote environment because it's really different than the way we managed it previously.
Great. Okay, Anna. So this question came in from Jennifer. She's asking, what have the leaders found to be the single toughest nut to crack during the pandemic in terms of work and supporting the business?
Ooh, why don't we let Michele take that one? That sounds like a good one for her.
Sure, give me the zinger, no problem.
You're welcome.
Well, I was relating a lot to what Courtney was just saying. I will touch on that briefly. We have found it's really important to continue to drive that accountability of teams, because the rest of the company is relying on us as leaders to make sure that if someone isn't performing as they need to manage to that. It's really hard to turn someone out of a company amid all of this unemployment. But we also know we have a great responsibility to the teams who are performing at a really high level to do that. So I just wanted to add that really quickly. The toughest nut, I don't know. I mean, every day is different. Every day hands us something new. And so I think it's just not, for me and my business, because it's hospitality, right? And I don't know how many have led in a hospitality world. You just never know what you're going to get. And so I think it's being, it's trusting your gut on decision making, being willing to make it in the fly, because you are not going to go and get to do a drive-by with someone at the next office. You have to trust your gut, go with your instincts, make decisions. Dan said this before. We have to make decisions, right? And we are not going to have that water cooler opportunity in the evening to do that. So we have to go with what we know, make decisions, recognize when we don't make the right ones. But I think that's it. I mean, you know, when you work in an office environment, you get to consult with people all day long. That's really gone, right? But our teams are expecting no less from us in terms of decision making. So that's the part that has, I guess, personally challenged me the most, and the thing I've really had to change the most.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. How about another one, Amanda?
Sure. Let me get this one pulled up. Okay, this one's from Leah. And this is for Dan. As the CEO of what appears to be a complex organization, I'm assuming that you have a large team of leaders. What advice can you give to us about how to lead other leaders?
That sounds like a plan. We talk about that a lot, and I do think one of the toughest transitions for people as you move laterally or up in organizations is figuring out how to lead leaders. It's a lot different than the small teams where you maybe developed an expertise or had to manage people at your earlier stages. And we focus on this a lot. In fact, at the end of the month, I'm going through my talent assessment for all of my direct reports with the board of directors. And one of the questions will be, how well did they lead leaders? And we actually have a matrix on that. I think the most important thing to do is to, like you do in many other aspects of life, but put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? If they're up and coming or they're very senior, and sometimes you end up leading people that have been in the business 40 years, that have a very established track record. Our founder of our company reports to me now, which is kind of a flip, right? But to think about what they need, to think about what they have to be successful, and then sitting down with them and kind of making sure you've got aligned expectations there. And if they know what the expectations are, they don't, and they can spend the time with you and tell you where they need help and where they don't. Then you're not looking over their shoulder. You're not in their business. You're not micromanaging them, because God forbid you're doing that. And now you got two people trying to do the same job, and probably neither one of them's doing it very well. But to really have that dialogue, make sure that the alignments are correct, that the roles are both understood, and then give them the space to go be leaders, and check back in with them and coach them and do all the other things. But you've got to give them that space, because we all know at various points in our career, we would have hated it if somebody were, looking over our shoulder constantly and not giving us the room to make some mistakes along the way to hit the overall objectives. So I think that's the biggest one.
Really good. Yeah, and you mentioned, I want to pull back in what you just said about alignment, because that goes with all the shifting priorities. I mean, each person has said today about just unprecedented times. The word pivot is like in our daily vocabulary. So it's important to make certain that we know exactly what the priorities are, that we have those alignment conversations. And Dan, I hope people hear you. Do not micromanage. Love that. If I could capture anything from this conversation, it would be Dan saying, do not micromanage. Although everybody's had amazing things to say. Amanda, we might have time for one more.
Okay, great. Here's a really fun question from Michele, and it's coming from Linan. She is wondering, Michele, in your role, you likely have your finger on the pulse of what the future of travel looks like. What are some shifts you're seeing in personal leisure travel post-COVID that you believe might be here to stay?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I mentioned one already. It's drive to. Our members before would hop on a plane for anything. And now our members are saying, yeah, I'll drive from Houston to Telluride so that I can go on vacation. People are willing to hop in the family truckster and drive a day and a half to get to Telluride or somewhere, right? They're not, they want to go to those drive-to places. So that's number one. We've been fortunate because people really love the certainty and safety of a home rather than a hotel, right? If you think about it, if you're going to a hotel with a big group, 10, 12 people, you know, you're getting in 5 different hotel rooms, you're getting in an elevator, you're likely having to go to a restaurant. So we've been fortunate that our model allows this safety because we can go in, deliver all of their groceries, have everything waiting for them, do a remote check-in. They don't have to interact with anyone at all. Members are looking, and affluent travelers are looking for those ways that they can travel, but do it safely. And then people are looking for, we used to do a lot of cruises. We would buy out an entire luxury liner. Maybe it had 300 suites on it, you know, a small luxury liner, 300 suites, something like that. I think we all know that cruising has changed. It will be, we'll yet to see what will happen there. But people still want to go out and have those experiences, right? So we have gotten into luxury catamarans for small groups where we will charter a luxury yacht or a luxury catamaran so that a small group of 6 to 8 can take that out. We provide the captain, we provide the food, the meals, the cooking, everything. They still get to have that luxury experience, but it's much smaller. We then extended that to luxury RV rentals where we'll provide the RV, we'll provide the daily itinerary, everything that you need to know. Where should I park? Where do I do? Literally everything. And we provide it. And so what for sure is true is that people want to travel in COVID because people are seeking those connections, right? We all want to see our friends and family. And for, you know, we all know we are sick of looking at our 4 walls. We want to look at someone else's 4 walls, right? And so it's all about bringing that to life, but doing it in a slightly different way. Outdoors is a big trend. Smaller, fewer people is a big trend. Private is a big trend. Cleanliness is a big trend. So those are the main things that I'm seeing.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, if any of you that are listening have any topics or ideas, or if there's leaders that you would like to hear from, Amanda, would you mind putting up on this on? Please email or call myself, Amy, or Amanda. And also, you know, if you would like to have a private conversation about how you can build your own leadership skills or even improve your own company through executive coaching, through leadership programs, or even team effectiveness work, please contact me. That's what we do all day long. We cannot wait for the next event. Please keep your eyes to the future, and we will be back on site together as soon as it is safe, hopefully at our next event in a few months. Thank you, everybody.